the microphone shortly if you would like to use the microphone, but there is a Q&A section that you can drop your questions as we move through the information. So it's my desire to provide you with a very clear, plain language review of the EQAO data that goes above and beyond what you would find on the public website. So I'm going to speak to four things, really three things, and the fourth will be the Q&A. I'm going to speak briefly about what the EQAO measures, and I'm going to give you a model of the curriculum, a model of schooling to think about, and then I'm going to speak to the results or the measurement of two perspectives, specifically the results over time and the current results, as well as I'll look at the results from the perspective in the context of mathematics from the four strands, as well as from three key skills. I'll look at the content from there. And then I'll speak briefly to some of the next steps that we've been implementing that I think will benefit not only the students that are achieving provincial standard, but also the students who are not. And I always like to say the narrative around change really should revolve around them. So I want to say that the EQAO measures culturally valued concepts and it measures culturally valued ways of reasoning. And it uses three perspectives or three skills: knowledge and understanding, which I will unpack later on. It measures these culturally valued concepts and ways of reasoning in the context of thinking skills. So thinking skills is the ability to create models, to justify solutions, and to perhaps you could say reason or explain why a particular choice is most relevant. And then it also measures these culturally valued concepts from the perspective of application. So knowledge and understanding is your ability to regurgitate information. Thinking is your ability to, I'm just going to use the word think, and then application is your ability to use your knowledge and understanding in different contexts. And so that's what it measures. So I indicated again, knowledge and understanding, thinking, and application are the three perspectives that these culturally valued concepts and ways of reasoning are measured. I'm going to use the word curriculum. That's what it is. And I'm going to say the curriculum is like a system, but I'm going to use the imagery of a family because I like families. And think of the curriculum as three sisters that ideally should work together, that should communicate together, but sometimes don't. And so we could look at the curriculum in terms of three sisters. So the first sister, we'll call that individual the intended curriculum. You'll find it on the public website or in paper documents. The second sister, we're going to call the implemented curriculum. So the intended curriculum has to be interpreted by the teacher. And there are many ways of interpreting the curriculum, whether it's through the use of software, mythology, or MathUp, or Jump Math. So many different ways of interpreting the curriculum. But the most important sister in the group, when we think of the curriculum, when we think of these culturally valued concepts, is what the students experience, and that's called the experienced curriculum. So those are the three ways we'd like to think about the curriculum. And in an ideal context, the teacher or the grade team's interpretation of the curriculum should lead to learning experiences that lead to greater levels of proficiency with these culturally valued concepts. And we often use the words like limited and some and considerable or even high degree of to describe and to characterize the student's experience with the intended curriculum. So those are some of the ways that we use. There are other ways as well, such as level 1, 2, and 3. So what we can say is that the results of, and this piece I do need to say, that the results of the EQAO assessment is the performance. If we look at last year's or the year before or the year before that, it really is the performance of different groups of individuals, right? Different groups of students. And by that very nature, because as human beings, we're all different. Um, one class is different from another class in terms of dynamics and capacity. And so by nature, the measurement will fluctuate. It's very, very normal. The nature of humanity is that different people bring different strengths to the table. Each cohort has its own strengths. Each cohort has its own set of learning needs, prior experiences, which are very important to the experiencing the intended curriculum, as well as other demographic factors that are really outside the control of the teacher. So, what we can say is a rise or a dip in scores from one year to the next is normal. It's to be expected, and does not automatically mean that we need to clutch our pearls, right? Pearl clutching is great in the movies, and there's a place for clutching pearls, but it doesn't mean we need to clutch pearls. It does not mean that necessarily the teaching quality or the programming was bad. It just simply means that perhaps the differences from year to year by the teacher was not taken into account. Having been a teacher for many years, there's always the ecstasy of thinking about the curriculum, thinking about my interpretation of the curriculum based on last year's cohort of students, and then stepping into the classroom and everything I had thought about and planned to do over the summer, just I had to let go of. And sometimes it can be quite difficult as teachers to let go of last year's interpretation and to recognize that we're dealing with a totally different cohort. So as we look at the results, I want you to so you're going to keep that in mind, that it's normal to see fluctuations. You're dealing with different groups over time. And so we will look at that and speak to that in terms of the trend data. And I want you to see the EQAO as just this. It's one data point, and it's actually quite stale in terms of the fact that it's yesterday, it's several months ago, right? It is stale data, but it's still relevant. So I'm going to say that in order for us to form a conclusion and really make accurate decisions based on EQAO data, making changes in how we teach and in terms of school improvement, we really need to look at a pattern over several years. But I'm going to say we need the word I'm going to use is a weight of evidence, right? So the EQAO is just one point. We need to look at report card data. We need to look at student work samples, perhaps even look at discerning student well-being and engagement with the curriculum. So those are some data points that also other data points that we use when we think about making any change to how we teach and how we interpret the curriculum. I always like to say that as I walk you through the data, I want you to not rush to judge. That's the very normal rush to judge, rush to conclusions, but to to let your disposition, your natural inclination be to ask questions, to be very curious. Curiosity is very important. So it's just one data point, and we need a weight of evidence to make some decisions about what we should do in this year and subsequent years. So here's the first piece. This is publicly available information, and what it does, it just indicates the percentage of last year's cohort of grade 3 students. And this is our grade 3 students who were at provincial standard, and that's the bar in the green, or better. And you'll notice, of course, that there was a decline. One cohort performed at a certain level. So the 2022 cohort, 90%. The second cohort was not that great. It was 79% were provincial standard. And then last year's cohort, these are the grade 3s, were at about 70% were at provincial standard. Should we clutch pearls? We could. But it's, again, just a simple data point, and it just forces me to ask some questions. What was going on? What was the cohort like? What were the learning needs? And it forces me to think about the grade threes who are now grade fours. How do we teach them differently, and what areas are they missing? Right, and that's important. In terms of writing, the cohort last year was not as strong. It could have been teaching, but it may have been learning needs, and it may have been just simply it's just a group of students who are behind a little bit in terms of their ability to write, and with the proper support that we put in place over time, will grow as writers. So those are the grade threes in terms of reading and writing. So let's do a little bit of comparison in terms of our grade threes. And so in terms of the district, and that's the information in the middle, and in terms of the province, we're there. We're competitive. Uh, uh, our cohort is quite reflective of the district and the province. Do we clutch pearls? We could, because again, when I think of school improvement, I'm not so much concerned about the students who are at a level 3 or a level 4, the students with considerable knowledge and understanding and considerable thinking skills and considerable application skills. I'm more concerned about the students who are at a level 2 or are approaching a level 2. My philosophy is a rising tide lifts all boats. And so when we think about school improvement, those students are always front and center. Their narrative is always front and center. So in terms of reading skills, we're there with the province. And in terms of our writing skills for our grade 3, that is last year's cohort, we're still there. A little better in terms of level 3, still competitive. Again, I am concerned about the level 2s and thinking about how do we move them to a level 3. All right. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to jot them down in the Q&A section of the Teams meeting, and I'll be sure to get to them. All right, so let's go to the grade 6s, and this is language data. And so again, it's a cohort, and our grade 6 cohort, very strong. 93% of that cohort, they're now in grade 7, were at provincial standard in terms of their reading, comprehension, and approximately 86% were at provincial standard and higher for last year, right? So still, I am concerned because the ultimate goal, perhaps the penultimate goal, is to move our 14% or our 7% to the next level, right? And to look at ways of improving. All right. So let's do a comparison across the districts. So that's publicly available information. And we're really better than the district as a whole. And we are slightly better than the province as a whole. Again, I'm still concerned about the 7% when it comes to reading, because obviously it would be nice to move our 3s to a 4 and our 2s to a 3. And that is always, I think, the key when it comes to school improvement. All right. So in terms of writing, again, we're fairly competitive with the district, thinking of the TDSB as a whole, as well as with the province as a whole. All right. So that's very good. All right, let's turn to mathematics. And the mathematics piece will be a bit longer because of the various strands. We want to dig deeper and to look at the various strands in mathematics. And again, with our grade 3s, there was an improvement, at least this cohort, with their specific learning needs, with their specific demographic profile, performed much better than the previous year's cohort. And then looking at our grade 6s, it was similar as well, that last year's cohort performed much better in terms of having a larger number at provincial standard or better. And so that number was higher. Still concerned about, again, the 29% and the 17%, thinking about ways that we can move them forward. But that's again, the narrative that I'd like to pursue. So let's do a comparison with the district, and then we'll look at the different 4 strands and look at the grade 3 results from the perspective of some key skills, knowledge and understanding, thinking, as well as application. So are we there with the province? Yeah, we're fairly there. It's fairly even distribution in terms of level 3 and 4. And so we are, for the most part, right there, you could say, with the district as well as with the province. We have had a larger proportion of our students scoring at a level 4. And in terms of our grade sixes, again, let's do some comparison with the district, that is the TDSB, and with the province. And we're fairly competitive, again, fairly strong, with about 64% of our students, or more than 64% of our students, scoring level 3 or higher. And 28% were at a level 2, or approaching a level 3, and with comparison to 40% for the district and 40 for the province. So again, yes, we can pat ourselves on the back. However, I do want to say that I would like to move our 2s, our level 2s, to a 3. And so that's the question. Who are they, and what can we do to support them in moving forward? So we've looked at an overview of publicly available data, and then we've looked at some comparison between the school and the province and the district. So let's dig a little deeper to talk about the school itself. And we're going to look at the math scores from two perspectives. First, from the perspective of the different branches or strands of mathematics. For the primary grade, there are 4 that they would have been tested on. And for our grade 6s, that cohort, there were 5 strands that they were tested on. And so what are the strands? Number is, again, I would like to say that mathematics really has 3 key roles. Mathematics is about counting small things, smaller and smaller things. It's about describing the things we see in the real world, as well as ordering things. So those are the 3 pieces, that 3 key categories that we use mathematics in. But there's some strands. So there's the number strand for the primary grade. It's all about working with whole numbers. For the primary grades, algebra is about interpreting patterns. Data is really is less so much about production of bar graphs and circle graphs. There's a place for that. But really, for me, right across the grades, it really is about understanding how we can use data to answer questions, to pose questions, and to find answer to questions. So representing and interpreting data. And then spatial sense is all about the language that we use to describe the shape of things, as well as it includes the measurement of things, so size and ordering things as well. All right, and then we'll look at the knowledge and understanding, thinking, and application. So I'm going to introduce you to you may not have seen this before. It's called a box plot. It's fairly interesting. So I'm going to walk you through how to look at the box plot. Again, we're going to be comparing the school with the board and the province. So at the very top are what we call whiskers. The whiskers define what in the group of individuals, what was the highest score, so that's the top whisker, and the bottom whisker defines what is the lowest score. So those are the whiskers. So you can see that in terms of our whiskers, the highest score was comparable to the district and the province, and we had a higher lower score than the district and the province. All right, so that's one way of looking at it. What are those bars, those colored bars? Well, they represent the 50%. They describe 50%, where 50% of the students, both in the school, where 50% of the students in the board, and where 50% of the students in the province are. Okay, so that's a picture of where the 50% are. The length of the bar is about variability, and variability just simply says the distance really between scores. So the longer the bar, the more variability there is. Ideally, we want the bar to be high and small. So we want all our students to have had a good We want all our students to have a strong experience with the curriculum and able to show a level of proficiency with the curriculum. Yes, there are always individual differences, so the bar will never be a line. So when we talk about and describe and compare ourselves, we're going to look at, if you can think of the center of the bar. So we're going to think about where is the center of our bar in comparison to the board and the province. And we're also going to look at the variability. So in this situation, we could say that in terms of numbers, so working with whole numbers, again, that's what we're going to look at. And so the question I'm going to use to interrogate this is, where do students at the school sit in terms of their ability to work with whole numbers in relation to the district and the province? So where do the students sit? And so what we can say is that students, in terms of their knowledge and understanding and thinking and application skills, when it comes to working with whole numbers, we have a similar level of fluency in working with whole numbers when we look at the board, the district, and when we look at the province as a whole. This cohort of students, they are competitive with the district and the board. Algebra, again, algebra for our primary students is about interpreting patterns, which leads into working with equations and variables. And so we can see that when we look roughly at the center of our bar, so that bar represents 50% of the students, it's fairly the same with the board and the province. And so what we can conclude is, just looking at our students' ability and fluency with algebra, with respect to interpreting patterns, we have a similar level of fluency in relation to the board and the province, right? So we're fairly competitive. Again, the question is, where do our students sit in terms of our ability to think about patterns? So data, yes, it is about producing bar graphs, but I think it really is more than that, much, much more than that. It is about using information to argue a point, using information to answer questions. And so, and looking at what's called the box plot, you can see that our variability is small, or shorter than the district, and much shorter than the province. So our students are fairly tight together. And the center of our bar is a little bit higher than the board and the province. So I'm going to conclude that when I look at last year's cohort of primary students now in grade 4, they have a better fluency in being able to draw conclusions when it comes to data, charts, and graphs. All right. So let's go to. So I'm missing some data. Spatial sense. I'm missing spatial sense, and that's the wrong graph. So I'm going to look to find that information, and if memory serves me right, we are much better than the province. And just give me a minute, and I'll click. Actually, I won't have a chance. All right. So that's a little boo-boo there, but we'll come back to that. All right. So let's look at our primary students in terms of knowledge and understanding, thinking, and application. I'm going to preface our look at the data by saying that this is one of the key things that we've been working with in terms of school changes, ensuring that we assess students, not just their knowledge and understanding. So if a teacher is only assessing knowledge and understanding, well, yeah, you would expect that your child should be able to regurgitate 100% of what they've been asked to eat or swallow or take in. But really what we should be looking at is developing our kids' thinking skills, so their ability to model, look back at solutions, reflect, evaluate. That's key, to be able to reason. And so we need to assess that and teach them how to do that, as well as we need to be assessing their ability to take their knowledge and understanding and apply it to different contexts. I've asked the teachers, though, when they create assessments, not to assess knowledge and understanding, but at the elementary level, yes, at the high school level, there are 3 components it's broken out. It's not here communication, but I've asked the teachers to see knowledge and understanding as embedded in thinking. You can't reason and justify if you don't know and understand, and to see knowledge and understanding as embedded in application because you can't apply what you don't know, right? So, but with the EQAO, that's broken out. So again, we're going to use the box plot, same idea. The whiskers are there, which give us define the high and the low. The box defines where 50% of our students are. And so we're looking at the center of our box, and I could conclude that they're fairly good. We're competitive, perhaps a little better in terms of our fluency in using this particular skill in the context of algebra, in the context of data, and in the context of spatial reasoning. So we're there. We're competitive. All right. So let's go to application. Again, that's an important skill, the ability to use your knowledge and understanding in a different context. And we're fairly similar. Our midpoint of our box is fairly close to the district, as well as it's fairly close to the province, just eyeballing it. And the length of our bar is a little shorter. So I'm just say fairly similar. Fluency in terms of our application skills, which is important. In terms of thinking, again, big variability in terms of thinking skills. And again, thinking is the ability to look back at a solution, to reason and justify, to create a model of things, to prove that we're there with the district and province, but there's a wide variability in terms of our students. So we need to look to tighten that. That's one of the goals. All right. Okay, good. I'm just looking at the Q&A just to see if there are any questions, and there are none. Okay. All right, so let's now turn to the juniors, and we're going to look with the juniors. There are 5 strands. There are 5 strands: number, algebra, data, spatial sense, and financial literacy. So with number, they begin to work with wonderful, the neighborhood of numbers that they work with is increased. So it's not just whole numbers, but it's the numbers in between. So fractions, decimals, crowded space, and as well as integers, a little less crowded space. That neighborhood is not as crowded, so integers as well. With algebra, it's about representing relationships with variables. That starts as early as grade 4. With data, the real emphasis for me with data should be on interpreting data to answer questions. We could look at it in terms of creating bar graphs, but in the context of EQAO, it is about using bar graphs and circles to answer questions and to express our understanding of the world. Spatial sense, again, it's geometry. It's the language that we use to describe the shape of things that hasn't changed in over 2,000 years. Measurement is, again, a part of spatial sense, and that is a way of counting things and ordering things. And financial literacy is about thinking about financial decisions. So let's have a look in terms of our juniors and the box plot. Same plot, same concept. The whiskers define high-low. The bar represents where 50% of our students are. And what we can conclude is that in terms of numbers, our juniors, in terms of their ability to work with whole numbers and fractions and decimals, that cohort is fairly fluent. Perhaps we could say has a better fluency than the district as well as the province, right? Just in terms of thinking of where the middle point of that bar is. And the variability is fairly low. In terms of algebra, so again, it's fluency in interpreting patterns and algebraic reasoning and using our understanding of patterns to create a model with variables. And so the variability is small. That's good. We want that box to be as tight as possible, as short as possible. And you can see that the center of that box is higher than the board, higher than the district and the province. And so there's a better level of fluency with respect to interpreting patterns and representing relationships. Very important. All right. Okay. All right. So data is, again, better fluency. I won't belabor the point. Our center line is a little higher and the bar is shorter. And so it answers the question, where do students at the school sit in terms of their ability to use data to draw conclusions in relation to the district and the board? So it answers that question. Spatial sense, this is correct for the juniors. If time permits, I'll have a look for the spatial sense for our primary grades. All right, so again, beautiful. Like to see the center line of our bar is just a little much higher than the district and the province. And I like to see that the variability between students is very small in terms of this cohort. So the length of the box is much smaller. All right, so that's that. Financial literacy, there's a fifth for our juniors, and we're okay. We're competitive. Um, our bar is longer, and the center of our bar probably is a little lower. So I'm just going to say it's similar, right? So similar level of fluency when it comes to thinking about financial decisions. Let's look at the three skills for our juniors, last year's cohort. Again, similar fluency in terms of using their knowledge and understanding in the context of algebra, data, spatial sense, and problems that deal with numbers. All right. In terms of their application skills, I love to see again short bar, very tight. The center line is just eyeing it is higher than the district and higher than the province. And so what we can say is the students who are now in grade 7 have a better fluency in their use of the skill in the context of a variety of strands. Right. And thinking is also, we could say, a better level of fluency. All right. So I've said quite a bit, and I'm just going to pause for about a minute to search for the spatial sense for our students. And where do I find that? So with our primary students, again, the bar is a bit, in terms of spatial sense, it's a bit longer. And our midpoint sits a bit higher, so big variability, but we're still competitive and still there. So it's okay. Good. All right, let's talk about next steps. And again, so let me talk about next steps. Oh, and you can also unmute yourself as well. So let's talk about next steps. So on the left-hand side, you'll see the district direction. In speaking with the parent council yesterday, the word strategy, when you think of the word strategy, think of the route. So in terms of math, the route that we're taking is the 401, and that, or the name of that route is called Achievement and Success, or the 401. When you think of the district goal, think of the destination where we're heading. Cornwall, in this case, we're heading to Montreal. And that's a broad sense. Montreal is a large place. And so how do we know that we've arrived at the place called Montreal, or specifically perhaps the neighborhood that we want to stop in? And that's the district indicator, right? Effective implementation of the curriculum. That's how we know that we've arrived at our district goal destination on that route. So we have been asked to take a school focus, and the school focus is tethered to the district direction, goal, and indicators. All school improvement is local. And so our goal is to increase math achievement on the report cards of all students to provincial standard and close disproportionate outcomes. And that word disproportionate outcome, or those group of words, simply means that if we see a group of students, whether they're IEP or students who, racialized students, or students who are ESL students that aren't succeeding, large group, that's what I call disproportionate outcomes, because success, all students, regardless of their ethnicity, the language, how long they've been in Canada, can succeed. And if there's a large group that's not succeeding, that we need to make some changes to support them. A rising tide lifts all boats. So our goal, starting in the beginning of the year, was to really look at the intended curriculum, to really look at the intended curriculum, to understand it, to see the scope and sequence of the intended curriculum. The truth be told, from grade 1 to grade 8, we teach the same thing. Let me say that again. From grade 1 to grade 8, we teach exactly the same thing, except that it's about sophistication, it's about complexity, and it's about the tools we use, because, for example, if we're looking at counting, we're looking for our students to count smaller and smaller things. And in order to count smaller and smaller things, we need some sophisticated tools. So teaching the same thing, but it just looks a little different as we move through. So I asked teachers to look at the intended curriculum and to think about it in terms of scope and sequence, and to begin to think about what are the essential skills that we need to focus in on. Um, there's a lot of information, a lot of things that need to be taught in the all the grades, but we need to recognize that if it's not taught or focused in on, we teach everything, but if it's not focused in on in grade one, hey, we can do it in grade two. Or we can leverage what was done in grade one to teach it in grade two. So looking at the intended curriculum was very important for our teachers. And because we really want to understand how did the designers of the curriculum intend it to be used? Because at the end of the day, the curriculum has to be interpreted. I'm going to say that again. Yes, the curriculum is a document in black and white or in color, but it still has to be interpreted. And you all know that when it comes to if it's language, there are many ways to interpret a particular word. You can have a look at a painting, as an example, and different people will come out with different interpretations, right? And so our goal was for our teachers to come together, not work in silos with a false interpretation of the curriculum, but to come together, put their heads together, and to really dig deep and to see the curriculum from different perspectives, and so to paint a beautiful 3D picture. So knowing the curriculum by exploring it as a set of essential skills, understanding the scope and sequence, seeing the progression in terms of the language at the grade one level. Kids just have to identify. By the time they're in grade six, they have to do things a bit more sophisticated where they have to perhaps describe or evaluate and synthesize. We began with the notion of moderated marking. So to help our teachers to understand that we always begin with assessment. So we don't teach and then come up with the assessment, because you should not teach you should not assess what you haven't taught. And there are four different, I'm going to use the word interpretations that we can use in terms of the curriculum. It's knowledge and understanding interpretation. There is a thinking component, a thinking interpretation of the curriculum. There's a communication component to the math curriculum and the language curriculum as well. So I always say that if you can't talk about what you've been taught in math, you really haven't learned. So communication is very important. Different ways of interpreting the communication piece, and then of course application is critical. So come up with the assessment. What are we looking to amplify in terms of the skills? And then we teach based on what we're going to assess our students. Another key important part when we think about the curriculum is not just the teacher interpretation, but it's also the experience that our students have. That's really central. We could call it knowing the learner. Really, really, really important. Because if a teacher has an interpretation from last year's cohort that they're looking to apply to this year's cohort, but the learning needs are different, the experience will not be as rich. And so the implemented curriculum must always be tethered to our experience. I've been very fortunate that without being asked, our teachers did a survey. The junior intermediate teachers did a survey of the students to understand their experience with the curriculum, what they like, what they're missing, how they view the curriculum, and that is going to be used to inform how they interpret the curriculum. All right. So, and hopefully I will share that with you at some later date. All right. Yeah. The math curriculum, I like this. The math curriculum is neat, at least the current iteration of it. It's more than just a description, but actually gives instructional strategies to teachers, which we want our teachers to begin to focus in on. So when it comes to interpreting the description that we see in the curriculum, there are things for teachers that will support them in coming to a real close interpretation of what the designers of the curriculum intended it to be. All right, so that's math. In terms of literacy, there are two pieces. It's really to support our early readers in building the skills in learning how to read so that in future years they can read to learn. So that's really the key. So that's where we talk about the benchmarks in our fall and winter screening. So our senior kindergarten and grade ones and twos, there is a screening tool called Nelson. It's okay. It's not a perfect tool like any diagnostic. There are false positives and false negatives, and but it's good. A better any test is better than no test, and so we've been screening because we're moving away in terms of literacy from discovery. So someone might say we need more time for older kids to read with younger kids, reading buddies. That's a method that works for some kids when it comes to reading. Some kids, it's just exposure, and that was the philosophy for many years with the language curriculum is just expose them to rich literature and they'll develop the skills. We know that about 10 to 15% of students, it doesn't work, right? We could use the word dyslexia, and so the science of reading is where we're moving, so that we're actually there is a scope and sequence with regard to how, with regard to mastering the ability to look at a text and to decode it. Every word is striving to become a sight word. So most of you uh, here maybe you don't struggle with decoding words, right? All of the words that you look at 90% are sight words, and the ones that you've never seen before, you've got some strategies to decode them. So you might look at W and A, and that's a wa, and ter, and so on. So you've got that skill to be able to decode really new words, but every word wants to become a sight word. And so we've spent about just a little over, close to $4,000 on decodable readers for our kindergarten students, grade one students, grade two, grade three, and any student that is struggling to read because they were under an interpretation called discovery. We've also been given digital access. So we purchased 5-year license, digital access to that, so that the books are fairly valuable. It would be nice for us to be able to have kids check them out because some countries are moving away from digital. They've seen the detrimental effect of a digital interpretation of the curriculum. So I won't mention the name of the country it's not Sweden, maybe it's Denmark. They've totally done away with anything online and they've moved to paper. And I have to say that I really agree. There's something about paper that's powerful, but everything in balance. So, all right. So digital access to that, book bags. All right. So that's where I'm going to stop, and I'm going to mute my microphone and I'm going to listen to you now. All right. So